I'm Sonya Morton Firth, and you're watching the Sonya Morton Firth Show. Today, my guest is George McGehrin. George is one of the top connectors on LinkedIn. Watch this interview and learn the traits of a successful entrepreneur. George, thank you so much for being a guest on my show for the second time. This is tape 2, modern technology, eh?
Yes.
So, George, thank you so much for joining me all the way from New York on that side of the water. And as I said, we have had this interview before, but because of whole technical Zoom problems,
Right.
It didn't record. So here we are again, and it's a pleasure talking to you again.
Well, it's a good excuse to hang out with you. I appreciate it. And I guess we'll preface it with the last time we did the whole interview, and then I don't know, maybe it was me. It was the technology piece, and then it disappeared right into.
But maybe it was all meant to be.
Yes, which is cool. But I feel like we're old friends now, which is a good problem to have.
We are.
Yeah.
George, now, am I right in saying that you have about 30,000 connections on your LinkedIn, and you've been ranked amongst the top connectors on LinkedIn?
So that is true. I was on LinkedIn, for example. I was an early. I think I've been signed up with them since 2005, right? So it wasn't really, it wasn't really a thing. But I saw the value early, and then I just got into it, and I've had 30,000 connections now for. It's been a couple of years now. It's been maybe, I would say, let's say we're 2020, 2016, 2015. I've had, I've it's actually a problem, right? It's because you're limited to 30,000 connections on LinkedIn, right? So we're constantly kind of recycling and seeing who to remove and who to keep. And
it's like sort of you've got your limits, so you've got to keep cutting it down.
But there are people. This is a tip about LinkedIn, by the way, that a lot of people say I hear this comment from executives. So I work with executives that are making from 300,000 to 4 to 5 million a year, and so we have a placement company, recruiting company, but we also have a coaching business, and we help with the branding. Sometimes they'll say, "Hey, George, I'm too busy running a business. I don't use LinkedIn, right? And I'm not a social media person." So I get the Facebook thing, maybe the LinkedIn piece is really important because you have 7 billion people on this planet, right? And every time you go try to do a deal, you're at the pub, you meet somebody, you're at a hotel and you meet somebody, they go on LinkedIn and they kind of check you out. LinkedIn is usually the first thing that pops up, right?
Absolutely.
So there's an elevator pitch that you have to be, there's an elevator pitch that you have to be really careful about. And so if you're hiring people, if you're growing a business, if you're, not just for the person as a candidate, sometimes people think LinkedIn is just a candidate thing. But it's a great marketing tool. I haven't had a resume in 20 years or a CV in 20 years, but I use LinkedIn as a marketing tool, as a business development tool, as a talent acquisition tool to hire people for my team. There's a lot of uses. So I saw that early, and I kind of went all in 2005.
So do you think the strategy behind you just connecting to lots of people has really helped? Has the number of connections helped you?
100%. And here's why, right? So I learned this lesson because I was sitting at a bar in San Francisco, right, in 2005. I think it was 2005, 2006. The guy next to me was the VP of engineering for LinkedIn, right? And we had this conversation, and I had mentioned, I only have like 300 contacts, and I connect to people that I know, and I don't connect to people that I don't know. He then said to me, he said, "George, the system is built. It's all about 6 degrees of separation, right?"
Yeah.
And he gave me an example of the bartender. He said, "Listen, maybe you wouldn't connect to the bartender because you say, well, they have nothing to do with what I do, and we're different businesses. But maybe that bartender is married to, an executive at a major corporation. So the fact that you're connected to this one person, it opens up a whole, floodgate for others. And that's the reality of LinkedIn, right? So I have 30,000 connections. And if you have 5,000, 10,000, I have more access to people right? So I can see more people.
Mm.
I also show up on more searches, per month, right? So people have more access to me. So when they do a search, there's a better chance of me showing up than somebody else, right? So it's all related on the interconnectivity of the. So you should literally connect. I mean, quite frankly, I try to connect to people that are usually either in Europe or in the United States, but you should connect to people that are primarily, you don't know who that other person's connected to, right? So you might be connected to 20,000 people, and they might be amazing contacts. Now I now have access to those 20,000 people one way or another.
And do you just sort of accept everyone that comes your way?
Yes.
I mean, I do now.
Yeah.
I just.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do. One trick to having 30,000 connections, or just, if you've got or 30,000 of anything, is you need to have somebody else take care of the work. So I don't personally manage my account. I have my team manages my LinkedIn account. If an important message comes in, they'll deal with it. If somebody, if there's you'd be surprised. Some people don't use LinkedIn because they think that they'll be just bombarded with solicitations, and that's anywhere, right? But I don't get that many, which is pretty good. And I've got my email on my email is on my about section, which is a tip for people. If you should, in your about section, it's the only part of the LinkedIn piece where you can the whole world can see. So, you can put an email or a phone number, if you'd like, but that's a good tip for the LinkedIn people out there.
That's a good point. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah.
For me, put my email in the about section. Definitely.
Right.
And what other tips would you give people? I mean, I presume, and I'll ask you what the landscape of recruitment over the past few months must have changed because of the pandemic. We can't not mention the pandemic. How has that changed, and how do you think LinkedIn can help that?
So you have a lot of people now that are just they would do they do the grind, right? They go to work, go to an office. I think the landscape of where people work is just, a lot of people now are kind of like, they think it's a pretty cool idea to be able to work remotely or virtually, right? Not to have to go into an office. My team, for example, we've been virtual or remote since 2009, right? So we've been on that for a while. But I think that in terms of, and that's going to change recruiting, because instead of having a company that just, let's say we're going to be in Texas or we're going to be in London, if you don't have to be, as a corporation, you don't have to be in London anymore. You can be anywhere, as long as I think talent will now drive where they live versus the company driving or deciding where the talent lives, right? So I think you'll see people that are going to be living in, all parts of the world. Maybe they'll be working in London, but they'll be living in Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
So
I think globalization.
Yeah, you'll see that. I mean, it's not really a word, but I call it, and my business model is set up this way. I call it geographically agnostic, right? Which is not, I mean, it doesn't mean anything. But that's kind of my invention of the word. But I if I need to move, or if I want to move to China tomorrow, right, I can move, right? It doesn't impact anything for me or my business. And I think people are going to start doing that much more often. There's so many airports out there. You can just get on a plane and go if you need to go. Yeah. And even the planes have Wi-Fi. You can work on the plane. I just think that's going to change drastically with recruiting. You're going to have a lot of people. Now, the fact that you don't have to go in an office, companies are also wise to that. And they're going to say, well, instead of the 80,000 pounds or the 200,000 pounds, we're going to pay you. We're going to give you 150, but you get to work from home, right? So choose. Yeah. So, but I think that's changed from the executive level. It's I would say the executive recruiting level, the level we're dealing with, it's still, things are still done face to face. So that's been on pause for a while, right? But
and what do you think? Because I'm a great believer in connection. Do you think that we're losing that part of business? And if we are, how important do you think that is to?
I don't know. Like you and I are kind of built the same way, right? Like, give me a choice between a Zoom video, or a restaurant. I'll meet you at the restaurant, right?
Definitely.
Like
Definitely.
101 times out of 100 times. Yeah. Like, why not? So I just think there's a lot of people, like, you're not going to change. You're not going to change who I am, right? Like, it's still, and I don't think you're going to change because of, like as soon as you think it's safe to do certain activities, like you're going to do it. Right. So I don't know. I don't think that's going to, I think the problem are the younger people, right? The younger people are learning, like they're learning not to go outside. They're learning to hide behind their phones and
Well, yeah, let's face it, even before all this kicked off, you'd go into a cafe or a bar or a restaurant, and there would be a group of what I call youngsters, like kids, and they're all looking down at their phone, they're not talking to each other, and it's like
terrible. Yeah. And you and I mean,
conversation.
Like so we meet, like, right, my phone's in my pocket, your phone's in your purse, and like it's not in front of us, right? We're not doing this thing. And you see that too. You see that when they're out, right? It's like they're in the circle and they're all just
and now it's going to be the mask on the phone.
Yeah.
It's
yeah. I call him a kid, but he's not a kid. He's 20. I mean, he's 27. He works on my team. Worked for me for 4 years, and he was like without a girlfriend for, he had a hard time meeting girls, and we went out one day like for lunch, and he's on his phone, and I'm like, there's 5 girls right there, just go talk to like, I mean, they just don't know socially, they lose that skill set, right, of just to talk to people. And it's not about like, go target 5 females, but it's like the fact that he doesn't socially know how to he's not comfortable with just even figuring something out like that. Right. So, like 4 years, if you're 27, I think he was 20, he's 27, 4 years without somebody is like, that's like, 25 years in dog years, right? Like it's a long time.
That's a long time.
But they're socially they have from a business standpoint, I see it all the time. We had a problem. It was a 6-figure problem, right? A deal that just went south. Like it was disastrous for us. And one of the guys that was on my team that was dealing with it, we talked about it, and he said, yeah, I'm going to send him an email and I'll text him later. And, I'm like, listen, you need to pick up the phone or go see the guy, like one or the other, but you're not going to solve a problem over over text.
Absolutely. And we always used to say that. I was in sales and in corporate life for 20 years. And it was always like, listen, just go down there with the contract, actually see them face to face. Don't just take it down there. There's the pen. Here's the sign. The good old place.
Well, they say there's a I forget who says this, but the contract, they say contract is just a contact with the R, right? The relationship, right? And that's what it is. So, I think the younger, one of the, I saw this on a Facebook business group. It was like for new people that were starting businesses. And one of the questions was, what should I do? Like I'm starting a new business. What should I do first? Should I buy a CRM? Should I spend money on Facebook ads? Should I hire a digital marketer? It was all these things, right? And like, I don't know, if I had a business, the first thing I would do is just go get clients, right? Like you don't need anything else. Just get clients. You can figure, you can, and they everything for them is digital. They want to hide behind like 150 emails, and then they assume that just money will magically, appear. It doesn't work that way. But I think from a recruiting standpoint, a corporation standpoint, you're going to see, I think the problem that maybe not a problem, but a lot of the younger generations, they just seem less active, right? You see it. I don't know if you notice this too, at least here in the States, in these little small towns, like you don't see kids outside riding their bicycles. You don't see kids outside skating. You don't see kids outside doing anything. Really, they're kind of inside their house.
Yeah, I mean, where I am in London, there's a lot of activity.
Right.
They're just sort of on the outskirts in a place called Richmond. So it's not in the centre London. It's a bit outside, and it's very green. And yeah, people have been outside a lot, but I hear that. But
like in general, like kids are just not. Like
not when I was a kid. No, not like when I was a kid. Everything was out on the streets.
I mean, it was like, Sonya, come home. So come home before the sun. Before it gets dark, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
Where are you going? I'm going to so and so's house.
Yeah.
And then come home before dark.
Yeah.
And then you prayed that you were home before dark because your parents would just, it was a problem, right?
Yeah.
And now you just don't see that. Like you don't see activity with kids unless it's like an organized sport. You don't see that. And I think I have a 5-year-old. My 5-year-old asked me the following question. He said, Dad, like, I just don't understand. Why do we have to physically go to school? Like, why can't I just do it from the computer, you know?
Wow.
And yeah,
That's
so
interesting from a 5-year-old.
yeah.
How are we're really, really changing.
So that's, I mean, he's like the rest of the 5-year-olds out there, right? That are like, this is easier just to, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's that's the negative of some of this, right? I think there's like, you know, if I want to move tomorrow to China, that's cool. But I think a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old needs to be, you know, there's a social aspect of learning things, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's changing, you know, that will change through this, the other thing too is companies, unfortunately, companies from a recruiting standpoint, they're realizing, you know, listen, wait, maybe we don't need the 350 people that we had. Maybe we need 180, you know? And I think a lot of people will be weeded out that weren't maybe adding value.
so on that, if you were to give advice to anyone that's watching this and they're just saying, oh God, you know, I've just been laid off or I've just been furloughed for a period of time, what should they do to differentiate themselves to an employee, a potential prospect employer?
Right. So a couple of things I would do. First of all, you need to get a LinkedIn like together, rocking, right? You need to get all that, you know, told really well, and like
email on the about page.
Exactly. I mean, get things, you know, get the story told properly. The second thing is, and we sell these services, right? And I tell people this before I mean, these are executives that spend a lot of money with us to do this. And I always preface it with, like, listen, you could have the most beautiful document, you know, prepared. It doesn't, if your strategy is off, it doesn't matter, you know, like the document and everything else is 15-20% of it. Some people think, especially if you're furloughed, like you've never really had to look for, maybe if you looked for a job 3 times in your life, they think, okay, I'm going to take the resume, I'm going to get the CV together, LinkedIn, and then, okay, I'm ready. And then I'm going to send. And then they become disappointed, right? That there's no response. They need to figure out, they have a sales problem, right? You need to figure out, okay, there's 15 jobs, there's 20 jobs that I'd like to go for. Who do I know that works at a company? Who might I know? And they need to take it offline to some extent, right?
So basically the old sales tactic of getting an introduction in, or I know
100%. That there's an 85% chance. I mean, this is for somebody, let's, you know, there's an 85% chance that somebody will find their next job through 6 degrees of separation, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a 2% response rate, by the way, if you apply to something online, right? So 2%. So you send your CV out 100 times, you get two responses. So it's pretty, you know, it's the same way, you know, so they have a marketing and they have a sales problem, but it's a people, it's not, you know, it's a people problem, and you need to figure out how to get to the people. You can also, if you're furloughed, this is a great tip for if you'd like to use LinkedIn. So go, you know, you go on LinkedIn and you say, okay, I'll give you an example. I work at Pepsi. Okay. Well, I worked at Pepsi, let's say. You can go on LinkedIn. You can say, find me everybody on LinkedIn that used to work at Pepsi, who was a marketing person. Let's say you're a marketing person. I'm a marketing manager. I can say, let me find every marketing manager that ever worked at Pepsi, who used to work at Pepsi. LinkedIn shows up, right? You'll then see where all of these people transition to, all these companies. So right there, you have a list of 15, 20, 30 companies that already like people that work at Pepsi, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You could technically, if you have you could technically go to the person and say, hey, I work at Pepsi right now. I worked at Pepsi. I worked under so-and-so. I think they were your boss. I see you work there. Tell me about the culture. Like, just engage them, right?
Yeah.
If you have anything, I'd love to, you'll then have that former Pepsi employee say, by the way, this person worked with a really difficult boss. They'd be really good. And you can play that game all day. I mean, that's what I would do. You could do that with universities. You could do that with, you know, if you went to like a special school when you're younger, you could do it. But that's an easy trick to see what companies hire, because culturally, we do this from the recruiting side, by the way. We when we have terrific candidates, we'll see the profile of companies that like that kind of candidate and who they hire from. And you'll see some companies hire like 10% of their force will be from like their workforce will be from one company, right? And there's this trend. So you need to look for trends. That's the best way to do it, right? So you need to strategically like fish where there are fish, right? And that's the best way to do it. So, but anyway, there's things like that. You can use all of these resources. I mean, they don't teach you this in school, right? It's not Like, how
No,
do you
they teach you the other method. They teach you just write loads of CVs, get it all done, and then send to as many people as possible, and one will hit, right?
Exactly. And they teach you that in school and university. It's like they don't teach you. One of the problems, by the way, with it, I think, in my opinion, the educational system is sometimes you have people that are making 40,000-50,000 pounds a year teaching people, and there's some people that maybe some people are not happy with that. They want more, right? And it's there's a lot of people that just want millions, or they want 500,000.
Well,
and
talking about the education system, what are your views on that? Because you're an entrepreneur, George.
Yeah.
You don't work for anyone; you work for yourself.
Right.
What are your views on the education system and being an entrepreneur?
Right. So, and you see this all the time with these people in these Ferraris and Lamborghinis and like, I mean, you just so you know, you can actually lease one for a day for a couple $100. So it's not that crazy, right? If you need one, right? There's this trend where, like, hey, don't go to university. You don't need school. There's that trend, right? And people are advising others, like, hey, don't go to university. I think, I mean, I'm a fan of going, university in general. I see that. You can see it when somebody, in how well they write. You can see it in how well they speak. You can see it, and I'm talking about, like, in general, right? I'm not talking about there are a portion of people that just are just
they go to have a good time, right?
Yeah, exactly. The person that runs my team, by the way, he went to university for 2 days and he quit, right? He's just like, hey, it's not for me, and he's like super bright, and he didn't go to university, but he was smart because he found a vehicle, right? Like a place like my team, to be able to to live well and make a living, right? So if you're not, if I think the more education you can get, the better off you are, and that's with anything. That's like hire a coach, right? But I think education, I think, is really, really important. I don't know about you, but I mean, I do make judgment calls based on, if somebody where they went to university, right? And
you do. Well, that's
I do.
interesting.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, I went to university, and I've got to say, okay, my degree got me through the door, certainly, into my
right.
job, but it was so unrelated to any of my jobs.
Right, but it's one of these things where I can tell you where they, every time you went into a meeting, right, or when, especially LinkedIn pops up, every time you went into a meeting, or every time there was a sales call, they're like, okay, people recognize that, right? They recognize these little things. They recognize, I don't know, they recognize that, that you're like you're just all about fitness, right? They recognize those things, right? And those are positive qualities. And I recognize it doesn't, I'm not really I'm not a university, I'm not fixated on the university they went to, but I'm fixated, did they actually go to university or not? It just shows there's a level of discipline, right? For that. But you can see this in emails. You see the way people write a lot of times. You can actually literally tell, kind of schooling they had by the way they phrase their sentences in an email, right?
Can they spell correctly, or do they put the punctuation in the right place? Then I just my PA to check.
No, I don't know, or texting, even texting, right? Even texting.
Yeah.
But I'm a fan of education in general. I don't know. I think the other, I guess, to contradict myself a little bit, I think you need to get some education, but like don't spend, don't go in debt, 300,000 pounds for something that it just, you have no intention to do, or don't do it because your parents told you to go to university, right?
Well, that's I guess where I was coming from. I think a lot of people now go with the herd. They follow what society say. They follow what their parents say, and they don't actually think about what they actually truly want.
Right.
And nine times out of 10, they end up in a job they absolutely hate.
Right.
And just praying for the day they can go on holiday, have a weekend, or retire. And actually, we all know if you enjoy life and what you're doing, and you have a passion for work, then retirement. Who wants to retire, right?
Yeah. We talked about this the first time I was on. We talked about this thing, right? And I call it a thing about we were both taught the same thing, right? Go to school, go to university, get a job, work there, and then just wait to retire or whatever.
Die, basically.
Yes, yeah,
Wait to
yeah.
die, work, done that, that's it. And then how miserable a life is that?
And that's a, I started, my first business I started, in the business I have now, I did all that, right? I worked at like the big four. I went to, I was blessed. I went to, new college. I went to Oxford. I did all this cool stuff and I was still unemployed, right?
Well,
and I thought,
what was the actual turning point?
Yeah, I just
start you on your amazing, journey.
I'd done, I was taught like, hey, go to school, get a job, play it safe, get a mortgage. I was taught all that stuff, right? Money's for rich people, and that you can't. It's just I was always taught that, right? Like that's how other people live. It's not you. And I was like, okay, that's just the way it is, right? Like, what am I going to do? So I went to school and I did really well. I got great jobs. And then I was in this unemployment line and I'm thinking, like, wow, like I've done everything I'm supposed to do and I'm still here. Like you start analyzing the character, like the unemployment line or the office is like, there's just so many characters. I mean, you could, like, people come in, there's some that you can just tell that some are together, some are not. And I'm thinking, wow, like, I'm here. Like I've done everything I'm supposed to do and I still don't have a job, Yeah. And then I started to, and this is where the economics like kind of kicked into my head, because I've got like some of that. Sometimes I have a mathematical mindset, but I thought, so if I work for somebody really hard, like I did, I'll get a 5% bonus or 10% bonus, and they'll pay for my toaster oven or whatever, right? Like, yeah, I have to pay for, I don't have to pay for drinks when I take a client out, like, okay, they're paying for drinks, cool.
If
I don't do a good job
on expenses,
Yeah, I mean, and if I don't do a good job, then I'm on the street, right? And I could be in the street just because, in my case, the company, it was a German company in Miami. I was living in Miami at the time. They just decided to close the office down, right? I mean, it did nothing to do with me. So I thought, like, my risk is pretty much the same. If I have a business, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I can have a great life. I can control my time. I control my money. I can control anything I do. And if I don't do well and I don't produce, I'm still in the street. Like I have the same risk, right? So it's a risk.
Was it at that moment when you were standing in the dole queue, in the queue,
yeah,
job office, that you actually thought, wow, this is makeup. This is I go.
It was that combined with, I used to play basketball. I mean, I used to play basketball every Saturday morning with bunch of these entrepreneurs, right? They would show up. One guy would show up, and they would show up in different cars and stuff. And one day they had asked me, they said, "Hey, George, like, what are you doing Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning?" And I'm like, I have to work. I can't. I mean, what am I doing? I'm working. Like that was it was the silliest question I'd ever heard. Like, what are you doing? What do you mean I'm working? Like, oh, we're gonna play basketball. Like, you should come by and play some hoops with us. Just come by. I'm like, no, I have to work. I can't. Yeah, it was like absurd for me. I didn't think that way. And it was that thought in the unemployment office. It was that combined with the risk thing. I just thought, like, especially in Miami. You see people on boats at like Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and you think, like, what do they do to be able to be in a boat in the afternoon? I don't know if have you ever seen that? You've like, what are they?
I've been to Miami a lot. I used to do a lot of work from here, from London in the city. A lot of my clients were over in Miami. Beautiful place.
So you see these people with this lifestyle. You're like, what do they do? Most of those people, they probably have a business. I mean, it's pretty. There's a pretty good chance they have a business. But and I thought of these people that I used to play basketball with. Some were really smart, some weren't smart. They all had, the common denominator was they all had their own business, right? Mm-hmm. And one was like exporting kiwis, and another one was importing bananas. Another one had like a tech company, and another guy had a school. And it was that, and I thought, you know what? Like, I'm young enough. I'm already broke, right? Like, I was like, I have nothing to lose, right? I mean, once you're broke, if you're broke, it's easy to have business because.
I guess it's one of those things when you reach rock bottom, there's no further place to go, right?
And I didn't. For me, it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. For me, it wasn't. I didn't feel like emotionally. I felt great. I didn't feel beat up. I didn't feel, like I'm pretty in general. I'm pretty positive about most things. But I was like, okay, this is a good time to fail. I didn't have any kids, right? All I had was tons and tons of debt. Like, that's all I had, right? And I was like, okay, the bank, like the bank doesn't care about me, like, okay, I had when I moved to Miami, there was this furniture company that said, hey, if you buy furniture now, you can pay 12 years later,
Oh yeah,
So,
yeah.
or I think it was 7 years. I don't know, but it was a lot. It was like pay whenever, and I had that. I had a lease for a year that I didn't have the money to pay. I had a car. It was a basic car, but I had a car I didn't have the money for. I could barely pay the cell phone bill, and I was like, what's the difference really? I might as well. And then, so I started a business, the recruiting business. And then I went from like broke to worse. Like got worse, right? For a couple of years.
What was your actual darkest moment?
Oh, the darkest moment. No, so the darkest moment became later in 2009, right? So I built up a business. I built this business up. I was the guy that was like, I'd go to a restaurant and say, how much is the bottle of whiskey or scotch or whatever? And I look at the price per just for one, for one drink or the bottle. And I would just buy the bottle and leave the bottle at the bar or the restaurant and come back later, like a couple weeks. I put my name on it. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just throwing money out. Like it was just, and the darkest moment was 2009. I built up my company of 50 people. Okay. And all of my clients were banks and financial institutions. I mean, we talked about that this one time.
Yeah.
And one day they just all called and like, hey, George, like, we're not going to, like, so I had Merrill Lynch. I had Merrill Lynch. I had UBS. I had Morgan Stanley. I had Wachovia, who's now Wells Fargo. And they all said, hey, George, like, we're pretty much like, like, yeah, like it was like, yeah, it was kind of like that, my furniture loan of like, we don't know when you're going to, so it took me a while, but I had to let go of 50 people. Right. So it was like disastrous. The problem I had was I didn't save any money. I at the time, I think I was making like $1 million a year. Right. And I was spending like 1.2 or 1.3,
Okay. And
so
you didn't invest any of this?
No, they call this, by the way, this is, if you're an entrepreneur and if you've never made money before in your life, this is a very important lesson that some people that have money, that start with money, that grew up with money, they know this lesson already. My kids now don't know this lesson, but I wasn't taught this. But if you're like the first time you've ever made real money in your family, there's this thing called lifestyle inflation, right? And you make 100,000 pounds, you spend 100. You
always spend what comes in, right?
Exactly. But then, there was a point where I couldn't outsell my stupidity, quite frankly, right? And I got called out. Like I got called out for my stupidity in that. So that was my version of coronavirus, COVID-19, right? Because I learned that was the lowest point where I had to decide, okay, I'm broke. I had two houses at the time. I lost 2 houses, right? I mean, it was just everything
What would your lesson be on that if you were to start all over again? If you were speaking to somebody that's decided, right, I want to be an entrepreneur, or I'm going to start.
Right. So number one, I mean, don't blame, I could have initially I blamed all of my clients that fired me, right? And fired everybody else in the economy. I blamed the economy. But then I realized, well, what about all the money I made? I didn't save anything, like, so you need to blame yourself. I mean, that's the really harsh truth of things, right? Like, if you're, it's like, it's like, you need to blame yourself for anything, right? It's like last night, by the way, I was like 9 o'clock at night,
Is it blame or is it take responsibility?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like, it's the same. If it's like you keep score, you don't keep score, but somebody's keeping score, right? It's last night at 9 o'clock at night, I was at this, I don't know if you've had this problem with the refrigerator, but like the refrigerator, I was supposed to go to bed. The refrigerator's like talking to me, like, eat something, George,
that problem. I was like, what problem with the refrigerator?
Yeah. But, like yesterday I was like, okay, let me just get out of the kitchen. I left the kitchen and I went upstairs and I was, but, so, like, you have to take responsibility, or you have to, realize, listen, it's you, it's not the food. It's not the
refrigerator going, open me up.
It's not the stress. It's you, right? And you have people have choices, and these little choices, like, do you eat those extra 300 calories, at 9 o'clock at night, you don't need, you do that 7 days a week, you know, it adds up in a month, and it's just those little choices make really big impacts. So you need to really think about, my first piece of advice is, if your money's not right, you need to get rid of the lifestyle inflation, and you know, if you can't afford to go to a bar and drink or pub, then, you know, drink at home. I don't know, but you need to figure out, there's things like that. So I got rid of that. I mean, I just went from, I cut a lot of things out that didn't make sense. I started to save a lot of my money, right? And I started to save money for like a rainy day, just in case, not only for my business, but also from personally, right? So like 10 years later, you know, I've got 30 people on my team, which is we now work remotely, right? I don't have office rents or anything. 10, 11 years later, COVID hits, you know, like we're fine. Like personally, we're fine. Professionally, my business is fine, because I've been saving for 11 years for something like this, right? So,
I hear a lot of entrepreneurs that, and you know, you can include obviously Richard Branson and all the big boys that, and big women. I'm not going to just say big boys, but that basically have literally, I hate to use the word fail, but because I don't like that word. I don't believe in failure. It's just a learning experience. But that basically, their business has gone haywire, yet they have the balls to get back up. And it's a little bit like my favorite Rocky quote: you get hit and you just keep on getting back up, and then they're making it again.
Right.
What do you think, what is that magic ingredient, that trait that makes a good entrepreneur, that makes that resilience?
Right. You get this, you get this. I mean, there's this thing, right? Like there's this bug in you that, you know, it's, and this is how I see it, but sometimes you literally print, you know, you print money sometimes, right? Like you make literally money appear out of nothing, right? Because it was in your head, right? I know this is, you've done this, you know, it's in your head, you have an idea, and then it converts to somebody exchanging their money with you. And that ability, that knowing that you can do that, you know, is a wonderful thing, right? Like I know no matter what happens to me with whatever business I'm in, if there's 100 people, like I'm always going to be the one standing. Like it's just, I'll get up earlier, I'll work harder, I'll figure out things quicker. And if I don't, I'll try it. And if I get punched down, I'll get up again. And I don't really care. You know, I think it's the Bransons of the world. He understands that he doesn't have to win 100% of the time. He can lose, you know, 20, 30, 40% of the time, and he's still winning. He gets that. And I think that's the trait, right? Like it's not about the money, it's about the game, right? And if you know that you can play the game, then I think that's what gets you up and up and up. And so I've now learned, by the way, since I took myself up again, I've also learned that things are cyclical, right? Like this might happen to me again. I don't think it will, because financially I've taken care of things. But if it does, like I'm ready to get up again, right? Like that's cool. I can deal with that. But it's a great question, because it's a very valid trait that people have.
And I think a lot of people would look at that, and I've had a lot of people say to me, I want to go into business. Do you think, you know, what are the traits of a great entrepreneur? And I guess it's like, well, you can look, are there traits, aren't there traits? Was your dad or mum an entrepreneur and all that? And people say, oh, there's an entrepreneurial gene.
Right. I don't agree with that, but.
Sorry? Yeah.
I don't agree with,
I don't either, but it's, what I've seen in great entrepreneurs is this great ability, this resilience,
right?
I call it, and it's the ability to get back up and shake yourself down, even though everything feels like the world is coming on top of you. And I describe it as not being a victim in life.
Right. Well, that's a great example. And this is, I was blessed that I grew up in a great household. Right. But I did grow up, just to call it the way it is, I grew up in a very mediocre mindset, right? Like that's the way we grow up. Sometimes people grow up that way. I just don't want to be that way. Like, you know, like people, one thing is happiness, you can be happy, but I didn't want to, like, I didn't understand the purpose of the other thing too, Sonya, is like, well, you and I we'll be dead much longer than we're alive. Right. And you better enjoy life, you know, like life is very, very short. So
I love life.
Yeah, like I don't want to be 75, 80 years old and say I could have, should have, would have, I just don't want to be that way. And I'm about to take, very soon I'll start taking flying lessons. I don't know if I tell you this, but I'll start taking flying lessons. And one of my friends had said, like, that's crazy, like it's like it's dangerous. And my comment is like, I don't want to be 75 and just say I could have done that, like I don't want to have that regret. And some people live that way. Some people live this
I always
mediocre mindset.
Yeah. I always ask myself the question, if I don't do this, will I regret it? If I don't,
Right.
if I'm on the verge of, don't I? And there's always the point I'm at is, if I leave this, will it come back and haunt me?
Right. Well, it's like there's a workout quote, right? It's like something like says like no one ever no one really regrets ever working out when they're done, right? Like ever.
No.
I forget the quote, but there's a quote on that about like you don't sometimes you. I mean, this is like 2 days ago. I went for a run. I didn't sleep. I just didn't sleep a lot for some reason. So I got up at like 5 and I went for a run. I had zero intention. I was in zero mood to go for a run. Right. But like, you just know, listen, I'll put my, just lace up and go and then, yeah. And then I mean, I do that. I mean, and you feel better. But life is so short. Like you have to enjoy it. And people, this is a piece of advice for an entrepreneur, by the way, if you're starting out, let's say you're, one of the fears that people have is, and this is the problem with being an entrepreneur. The problem is that you get paid literally to the penny, what exactly what you're worth, right? Like that's what people are afraid about. They're afraid because they've always had this cushy sort of job, where they make their, but then they come and then now they're in the marketplace and they have to sell a service or they have to sell a they're getting paid to the penny, like to the penny what you're worth. You can't complain about your boss that they're paying you 40,000 pounds less than they should. You're getting paid exactly what the market determines what you should get paid, right? So,
or what you think you should be paid.
Right. And exactly. Sometimes people, that's a great point. People undercharge their services. They say, I wouldn't pay for that myself. Yeah. That's a great point. They undercharge their services.
Yeah. And if you've got, self-worth issues, I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs, I know I've had that as well, where it's like, should I really be charging that? Can I be really charging that? And the answer is, you don't know your own self-worth. You don't value yourself.
Right. Well, I've had that dilemma before. I mean, sometimes I have it with pricing for our branding services, and I've yet to have, but what I've noticed is that the more you charge, your sales approach changes, your energy changes, your enthusiasm to work with that client changes, and you actually produce a better pre-sales environment, because you yourself have to convince yourself that you're charging 30% more, right? And you work harder for the 30%, and you'd be surprised. I mean, but I agree. I mean, people they undercharge, and then they get bad clients, right? And they have these clients that are terrible.
And then they moan about their clients, the clients doesn't pay, and it's a
right. The best clients are the ones that, if they can, number one, if they don't complain about the price and they just want to pay you, they're not worried about the money part of it. Those are the best clients, because they're worried about, you can then, they understand the idea of exchanging their money for your expertise. They get that. Yeah. And but that's a great point. As an entrepreneur, we undercharge, because we think that we're taking our own financial problems and thinking that the other person has the same problem, right? And it's not true sometimes, right? It's not true. That's a great point for an entrepreneur about undercharging.
I really do.
This is my litmus test is, I mean, until somebody tells you that you're like literally listen, that's absurd, that's a crazy price. That's how you know you're not charging enough, So, but when you listen, if you're going to charge more, you have to add value. You just can't. That's people want to charge, 10,000 pounds for a course, but you have to add 100,000 pounds of value, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Yeah. Talking of courses and adding value, what's the best thing that you've done for yourself to add value and help you in business and being an entrepreneur? If you could look back, and I guess at the young George at 20, say, young
Yeah, yeah.
man, this is what you need to do because this is going to be a game changer, what would that be?
So a couple of things. So it's first of all, the money thing. I literally know the percentage of, if I make if I make $10 today, I know exactly what percentage stays in the business, what percentage goes here, what percentage goes here. So I have the money thing really figured out, right?
What percentage do you take back or save or reinvest?
Yeah. So
Save $10 because it's easy.
right. So we have a couple businesses, right? So I have on my businesses, I have a scale of like, I get 50%, and the more that we earn, then I get 40%, then I get 20%, then I get 15%. And then the idea is to use the money to be able to hire people to, but the worst case scenario is I get 50% of the sale, let's say, goes to my family. Of that 50%, I mean, we spend 20% of the, so then now my family, let's say so there's $100 sale, my family gets $50, right? $50.
Yeah.
Okay. Of the $50 that's now in the McGehrin household, right? We spend 20% of it to live so we live on 20%. The other 80% goes into, it goes into savings, we're going to start buying properties and real estate. And so we're living on 20% of, of pretty much our income, right? Which is and I've got my wife, so she's a stay-at-home mom. I mean, we live in an expensive area. But we live on 20%. I used to live on 120%, right?
I mean, 20%, that's quite frugal, I guess, because a lot of people say, well, if you can save 20% of your income, if you are just an employee, they say, yeah.
So this goes back to the lifestyle inflation. Goes back to the, so I run 3 businesses, right? One's an 8-figure business, one's a 7-figure, and then the third is a 6-figure. So it's relative also to what somebody makes, right? So, if you make 100,000 pounds, yeah, it's hard to live on 20,000 pounds, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's relative, but that's the issue that I had before, is that, I was making X and I was spending X plus 20%. Yeah. So I've learned that way. But the first thing is I have my money right. Number 2 is, and we talked about this before, but I journal a lot in my, and I like journaling because you write things down, and then later it's like having a recording box in your head. You read it, and sometimes you're like, wow, I didn't do that. I should have done that. I'm so, I don't know. I'm so lazy. I'll get somebody else to do this.
And when do you journal? Do you find there's a particular?
Yeah, I do it in the morning. I do it in the morning. So I journal. I do it pretty religiously. Exercise, as you know, I don't know about you, but like I'm convinced that people make more money when they exercise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just think the amount of people I've spoken to, you read about, talk to, every single person, whether it be man, woman, whatever, has said exercise forms a part of their daily, or certainly part of their weekly ritual, but if not daily ritual.
And I just think financially, it's just a great tool gives you lots of energy. Like I'm 45, I have more energy than people that are 20. I feel great, right? So, so I exercise. I exercise, right? I'm active. The third thing I do is this is a very important thing. I'm very conscious of time. I'm very conscious of what my time per hour is, right? And as an entrepreneur, I delegate everything, right? Pretty much I delegate most of my day. Because my time.
I'm smiling because I love it, because I'm with you with the delegation.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I get to do important things like talk, hang out with you, and I've got 29 people right now. It's like 29. Right now per day. Think about this. Somebody works 8 hours a day, right? I'm working 30 times 8. I'm working 240 hours a day. If you think about this. So who will be more productive? The person that works 8 hours a day, or the person that works 40 hours a day? So that's,
what can you say to the person that says, oh, great, George, that sounds fantastic, but I've got no money to pay anyone to delegate. Right. I'm just starting out. What do I do?
Right. Well, the very reason you don't have the money is the very reason that you need to get somebody in your team, because this is so if you have no money, so let's say you said first year I want to make 50,000 pounds, right? Or let's say 100,000 pounds. Your time is worth, if you work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, your time is worth, so it's 2,080 hours. Your time is worth 50 pounds an hour. That's what your time is worth, right? So if you're the best email typist, you know, like you're typing away, that email cost you $50, 50 pounds an hour, right? That's what it cost you. You can pay somebody 10 pounds an hour to take care of your email. 10 pounds an hour to take care of the same person can take care of the calendar. Meanwhile, Sonya, you know, at 50 pounds an hour can go out and get clients.
Can do what he is good at. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a 500 pound an hour task, right? And that's how you make more money. And there is not one company that you've ever heard of that the person sits and hangs out at a cafe by himself or herself. It doesn't exist. Like, they just don't exist, right?
I completely agree. I think delegation is the most wonderful thing out there.
Yeah.
And yet so many people are too frightened to do it. I remember when I started my show, you know, people said to me, oh, you know, get your own camera and set it up over here and then just download it, edit here, do that. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
No. When I do my face-to-face interviews, I have a fantastic cameraman.
I love that.
I love that. Film. We do quality shows, and he does the editing. I look over it, of course, but you know, I'm not that's not my skill set. My skill is the talking to
people. Well, let me tell you something that adds a lot of value, because, for example, in my team, because I mean, you and I know each other because of a mutual friend, because of Mark, right? And when there was a referral, right, my team gave me a quick, like, hey, George, by the way, you know, Mark was nice enough to refer us to Sonya, and, you know, and Sonya, and they showed me some of the work, and I was like, oh my God, amazing. Like, I'd love to be in her show, you know, like and that's because you professionally, you know, had things taken care of. Right. And it's like, you have to delegate, and that's just the way, if you really want to do anything. Most people start a business because they want more money, they want more time, they want maybe freedom, right? You're not going to get that by working, you know, you're just exchanging time for money if you're just doing it by yourself. I have somebody that I know that he literally runs like a digital marketing. I mean, he does like websites and things. I see him all the time at this local Starbucks near my house, and his name is Gabriel. And I tell him, Gabriel, like, what are you doing? Like, you know, like, you need to, I can go into a Starbucks at 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock at night. He's there with his laptop, right? Or I'll see him there on like on a Tuesday morning. He's there with his laptop, and he's just like, I mean, he's grinding, you know? Yeah. And it's not the way to run a business. It's just, you're better off, quite frankly, just working if you're going to just do the solopreneur thing, you're better off working for a company. You get holiday. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's not, one of the things I was going to say, this is important. I schedule my day really, really well, like really well. And it's I have it set up in like sectors or sections where pretty much my Thursday for the next 4 months is the same Thursday that I had today, that I will have today. So in the same way, almost like people think about, you know, they eat at the same time, they exercise at the same time. So I do sales calls at exactly the same time every day. I do partnership calls on Saturdays from 4 to 6. I mean, if somebody wants to do a partnership or whatever, my team knows, put it on Saturday at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, right? And it's really structured how I set that up.
What would your typical day look like if you were to do a typical George day?
Yeah, so I mean, today's Friday, so I don't even know what date it is. Today's Friday, right? So yeah, today's Friday. So I mean, this morning I woke up at 5:30, quick cup of coffee, went for a run, ran 5K, right? Got back, you know, shower. I do this. I mean, I don't eat breakfast. I do this intermittent fasting thing.
Yeah.
Right? So I mean, I just feel better. So today I had a couple of sales calls, right? And usually on Fridays I'm done by 11:30, 12 o'clock. I'm done for the day. So, but today I'm hanging out with you. So you know, when we're finished, I'm gonna do a quick team call just for like 30 minutes, make sure everybody's, you know, cool. And then there's a pipeline. We have a dashboard. I'm gonna look at the pipeline for next week, make sure my team's set up, and then I go home. That's my schedule on a Friday, right?
Nice.
So it's a 3 or 4 hour workday usually, right? Sometimes 5. I work 3 hours a day, right? Sometimes 4, but I work every day. So I work literally Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
So this is how I see this. I mean, if I'm going to work, I don't work that much. So, if I'm going to take off pretty much 5 hours a day, then I don't really deserve Saturday and Sunday. And I get bored too. I don't need to be like, what am I going to do? I don't, watch TV. It's not really, but this is the privilege of having, a business. If I didn't get a workout in, I'll cancel my day. Like I need to get my workout in first, and then I do the other stuff. So it's a really, like when you miss your workout, it's terrible. Like you feel.
I completely agree. And the reason I ask you about your daily rituals, because I do think it is part of putting yourself up for success for the rest of the day or for the rest. And I absolutely agree. Some form of exercise the first thing in the morning. I mean, I can't, like, if it gets past a certain time, I then don't do it. I'm not one of these train in the evening. I need to get it done. I feel energized and I'm ready to go.
And it ruins, I know it just ruins the rest of the day, right? Like you feel, it's almost like you feel sick or something like that. I mean, you're addicted, and I say addiction, but it's like, maybe it's an addiction, but like, even if you've gone out with your friends for drinks and then, the next day you're still in the gym or you're still working, that's how you're like, okay, I'm hooked on this. Right.
Yeah.
So
it's become an obsession. Definitely.
Yeah. But I just think that's one of the things that I did differently, as well. I mean, I just made sure that I implemented exercise because I wasn't like that always. Right. I used to weigh 280 pounds like years ago. Isn't that crazy? I mean, I was unhealthy. Right. And I was like, okay, what's the point of making, I changed a lot of things in my life, the money thing, the health thing. I'm less stressed. The work schedule I used to work 5 days a week. And then one day I was like, why do we work 5 days a week? It's because somebody told us to work 5 days a week. Right.
Tell me, do you look at spirituality or any other sort of forms of meditation or?
No, that's my next thing. I'm so ignorant to that, everyone tells me to meditate.
Meditation that's a bit of a game changer as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm always afraid that, and I say afraid, but it's almost like I feel too wired, maybe that's wired.
Why you need to do it. That's why you need to do it. Cause that's exactly what I thought as well. It's like, but I'm just full of energy. It's like, that's what you need to do. You need to.
So what's your recommendation? Your recommendation is to go to like a school or get somebody one-on-one or just online?
I mean, there is so much stuff online. There's apps that you can get, or just some nice music. I mean, do you like the outdoors? The best thing for me to do is sitting in nature. Just start 5 minutes, put some nice sort of gentle music on if you want to do it that way, or find a guided meditation, some nice voice that'll just talk you through it, and then that's it. You're just sitting.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And
I love the outdoors. I mean, I run these ultra marathons. It's all trail, and it's the coolest thing. I love outdoors are great, right? So it's you must be the 50th person that's told me this in the last year, right? Which is good. It means I'm hanging out with good people, right?
Yeah, so. and they've proven that it can do so many things health-wise as well. Rejuvenation of the cells.
Yeah.
And just for general, if you are stressed, if you do get stressed, and everyone's got different ways of dealing with that stress. What happens with me is my decision making then goes awry because I've got overwhelm. I've got so many things going in my mind. If I just take 5 or 10 minutes just to calm down, get myself really centered into my core, sitting out in nature, then I find I can make much more informed decisions from a place of truth and a place of not being anxious and stressed and I've got to do this, I've got to do that. It's just
I need to maybe next time when we meet up, I'll tell you my success story with the meditation, because that's everyone's told me that, everyone's told me that, and they say it's like a game changer, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you can do it. I mean, I see it. So when I go for runs, I see people doing it at the park, and they just look very peaceful, right? So
it's and you never know what comes to you in those moments of peace.
Yeah, and we've got this we have a place. It's a flat that's it's in Peru. It overlooks the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, perfect place to do it. Oh my God.
And so and it just there's a little park in front of us, right? But just go to the park and there's a cliff and you just kind of like, I could totally do it there too, right? When I'm there. So, yeah.
George, we're coming to the end of my interview, and I feel like we could talk forever. There's definitely going to be a part 2, and hopefully in person. But
part 4, I think, right? Part 4.
Part 4.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully there's no technical challenges this time round. But my last question is, if you were to write a message in a bottle for future generations to find, what would that message be?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I would just say, don't stop dreaming, like be your own dreamer, and don't let other people dream for you. Right. That's probably the message I would say. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. George, it's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Sonya.
You on my show. Namaste. And I hope
that
we will see each other in person.
Thank you. It was awesome. You're so much energy. It's great to be on your show again. I love it.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember, there's a new interview out every Monday, so hit subscribe and like, and you'll get it straight into your inbox.